G'day guys, welcome to the SuperCoach AFL Marsh Series review. Paige Cardona from Fox Sports will join myself, Tim Michell, very shortly to give us your thoughts on, to give our thoughts on everything that's transpired throughout the pre-season series and hopefully point you in the right direction when it comes to selecting your SuperCoach team. Who could believe we're only 9 days away from the big blockbuster to kick off the season between Carlton and the reigning premiers Richmond. So plenty to look forward to. Obviously a rolling lockout in round one, which means that we'll only have to lock in the Blues and the Tigers on that first night of the season, thankfully, because certainly the big theme of the past couple of weeks in the pre-season has been the rookie carnage that has unfolded. I'm sure plenty of you have been to the Herald Sun website, heraldsun.com.au, and had a look at all the great rookie analysis that Dan Batten has done for SuperCoach, which is heading up towards about 100 names in his rookie Bible. And we've also got Gary Buckenara, the recruiting guru, his thoughts on some of the rookies that he's tracked pretty closely in the past couple of years too. So they're certainly both worth a read. But Dan's Bible has got the Marsh Series scores from all the rookies as well, which, is great info. Considering that we're trying to work out who's actually going to get a game in round one. Curtis Taylor from North Melbourne was one of those that really put his hand up on the weekend. It was great to see. And considering he only scored 31 and 9 last year in his 2 games, still priced at 123k as a forward, which is pretty welcome as well. And the big news, if you haven't caught up with it while you've been at work today or uni or whatever you might be up to, is that looks like, or more than likely anyway, Stuart Dew has flagged that Connor Butterick, who's a 106k SuperCoach forward mid, and also Isaac Rankine, who didn't see any action in the pre-season and went from being one of the most popular rookies to being scratched from a lot of SuperCoach teams. It looks more than likely now that, Isaac Rankine is going to debut in round one for the Suns as well. So 123k forward. That's more good news there and might free up some cash to spend on some premium forwards, or even for all those that have been looking at some alternatives to the Max Gawn-Brodie Grundy combination in the rucks. You might be able to look at getting Max Gawn back into your side if you're not sort of looking at those mid-price forwards and trying to get onto the premium rucks as well. So, as I say, we'll be joined by Paige Cardona from Fox Sports very shortly. Paige is going to give us her thoughts on a couple of the bolters that caught her eye during the pre-season. And we're also going to take your questions as well, which is all important. If you wanted to, drop us a line, just leave a comment on our Facebook page, and either myself or Paige will endeavour to answer it for you shortly as well. Don't forget, we've also got all our SuperCoach AFL podcasts, which have been going up throughout the pre-season as well, with thoughts of myself, Al Patton, and also Dan Begala, the SuperCoach investor. And on a special podcast this week, we'll actually have the last year's winner, Dwayne Delmenico, is going to join us. So that's certainly one to look forward to. The number one SuperCoach of 2019 is going to join this week's podcast. So well worth tuning into there. So the first question that's come in, I'll take this one, is from Dylan Royal, and he says Stevens or Robertson. So those that have been listening to the podcast throughout pre-season will well and truly know that my mid prices are sort of what I favour, and trying to eke out a bit of value in your SuperCoach team. And both of these players, Jack Steven and Dylan Robertson, have posted premium numbers in previous seasons, but priced a lot lower for one reason or another. Jack Steven, after only playing 7 games last year, in which he averaged 74. Dylan Robertson, who missed the majority of last year as well, and then has had heart issues in the past couple of years as well. He's only 260k in defence, so I don't see a reason that you couldn't get both of those guys. They're both in my team at the moment as well. So if it's possible, depending on how your team is set up at the moment, I would be looking at getting both of those guys in there. We should work them as well. Paige has just come online, which is great to see. Paige, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Tim. Sorry for my slight delay here. Things are getting a bit crazy, as you can expect over at Fox Footy.
No, that's all right. I'm sure people are getting sick of my voice anyway after 5 minutes or so of it. So good to have an alternative as well. So I was just going through a question from Dylan Royal that had dropped in before we get your thoughts on the preseason, which was should he pick Jack Stephen or Dylan Robertson? And I sort of came to both really, because they're both cheap enough that you can have them both, and both have posted premium numbers in the past. So I don't see why you wouldn't start them both.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Robertson, particularly at that price, it's kind of hard to ignore. I mean, even if he averages that sort of 70 range. I mean, he did have that really premium season a couple of years ago when he was playing, when he had that, 110 or something, I think he peaked at. And I think at that price and with his job security, really, it's not really much of a risk. Maybe his ceiling will take a little bit to come into fruition, but I wouldn't expect him to really kind of drop or off or anything too badly. And well, we know obviously with Jack Stephen, he's been a star player for the Saints for so long, and I think he'll really come into his own in that midfield, particularly with a few question marks on the fitness of a few Geelong players. So I'd take Stephen, actually. I mean, I've fiddled around with him in my team. I don't know if I love it, maybe because I'm a little bit worried about his injury history, but again, at that price, can you really be too concerned? I mean, there's so many options at around that price anyway that I guess if he does have a setback in an injury, it's a simple trade to someone else who's similarly priced. So
yeah, no, definitely. There's not too many players in that range that have scored 100 plus before in their career 2 or 3 times, as Jack Stephen has either. So Paige, what did you take away from the Marsh series? I know a question's come in on one of the guys that really caught your eye from up at GWS, but I'm sure you're like thousands of super coaches out there that have been tinkering and making plenty of changes over the past couple of weeks to your side. How close are you to what you think you'll go in with come round one?
I think like all of us, our teams just keep changing almost daily. But the thing that probably impressed me the most was the amount of awkwardly priced players that have genuine claims to starting in teams. And in years past, that's really kind of not been a prevalent thing. And, for me, you only have to look at the forward line of about, a dozen players I think we've probably capped off between us that have serious, stakes to starting in our teams. And that's probably been the most interesting concept. The other half of that has been the worry surrounding the rookie price players. I feel like this is toilet paper gate for rookie price players. It's such a scarcity at the moment. And honestly, I think I'm just going to pick rookies based on who's named in round one and not sort of get too caught up in, who might be around and who might not be.
Yeah, that might end up being the best way to go. And I think a lot of people have been looking at those top priced rookies where a couple of years ago they were almost sworn off. You didn't pick a player that was above 150,000 because it's so hard to generate cash from that starting price. You've got to be scoring 60s or 70s pretty regularly, which we know rookies can be a bit volatile with their scoring. But suddenly lots of us are looking at Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, 189,000. John Noble from Collingwood, I know you're pretty hot on him at 215,000, even up to sort of one of the guys that I know caught your eye during the Marsh series, Isaac Cumming from GWS, who's 245k. So hasn't been a big scorer in past years, but certainly he's one that looked pretty slick off halfback for GWS, and looks like he's got reasonable job security as well. We're just for those that don't know what Isaac looks like, that's him next to the two of us. So what do you think about the idea of trying to get as many of those top price rookies in and maybe paying up a bit more for job security as opposed to going for those bargain basement rookies that might be in and out even if they're named for round one?
Well, I think you're spot on. I think you say it right there, Tim. The issue is here we are looking at job security. And for me, I would rather pay a little bit more to have a bit better job security than to maybe, skimp on a few dollars here and there, which, you're kind of playing, with fire a little bit, because a lot of these guys, I mean, two North Melbourne guys for me, you've got Marnie and you've got Curtis Taylor. They look like they might feature early in the season, but how long are they going to last considering the amount of North Melbourne players to come back into that team? On the flip side, you've got guys like, Taranto has gone down. That opens a spot for Green potentially in the midfield. You look at that half back line and Cummings slotting in perfectly across there. Maybe he's in contention with Lachlan Ash for that position. And that's something, again, you have to sort of weigh up. But, John Noble, Collingwood, I've just seen here David Greenwood's mentioned John Noble here on the chat. And I've said this on Twitter a few times. I'm going to say it again now. I think he's got the makings of a Caleb Daniel 2.0. I think that's where he's headed. The way he sort of ping-pongs around that back line, wins the footy and always elects to kick. And he doesn't sort of just bomb away either. He's really calculated in the way he moves the footy, hits those short targets really nicely, doesn't waste the footy, doesn't tend to waste a possession. So he's really favoured in Collingwood's back six purely because he's just very composed. And I think when you're coming out of defence, composure is everything.
And as you know, the Pies play that high possession style as well. So that
it's very favoured. Very favoured to SuperCoach. So, I mean, if that ball's going to be ping-ponging around numerous times before the chain ends up in the forward line, well, then, you're getting points for jam, essentially. I think Noble's a great pick. And coming for me as well, you mentioned Brandon Zerk-Thatcher in defence too. And he's an interesting one, Tim. I mean, we don't often see rookie defenders who play as key positions win the footy the way he does. And I think that's probably why, round one, we probably went, maybe not sure. We'll see how he backs up in round two. And I thought he backed up terrifically. And he more than holds his own, but he can win the footy in his own right. Yeah, so I like him.
And Blake Carousel said it on Sunday. Yeah, he was close to best on ground. I watched that game pretty closely, and he posted 104 SuperCoach points. He was pretty efficient too, but it was his intercept marking that was the most impressive aspect of his game, and I think that bodes pretty well for his job security, albeit I think most people probably expect that the big three, when they get together for Essendon this year, are going to be Paddy Ambrose, Cale Hooker, who's unlikely to be there round one, and then also Michael Hurley, who played alongside Brandon Zerk-Thatcher down in Colac. So he might get squeezed out when Patrick Ambrose comes back, but he's gone down with a PCL.
Jordan Ridley thereabouts as well. So, they've got types as well, Essendon.
Yeah, but you're looking at Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, aren't you, and thinking, if I can get 6 to 8 weeks out of him, if he scores reasonably well, he gets to 350K, 400K, then you can make a decision as to whether you cash him in or whether you've got a bit of cash in the bank already and you can jump on a fallen premium. And I think any astute SuperCoach will tell you want to get to full premium status as soon as possible. And look, if he can make you 200,000 in the first couple of months of the season, that's going to be absolute gold to try and get you there, whether it's through banking the cash or jumping on a play that might have started at 500,000 but has dropped 100,000 based on a couple of quiet games.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think, really what we're looking for is value, but we're looking for value really quickly in the season. So, if you can get these guys that have that job security, the last thing, the horror thing for super coaches, and we tend to get a player that fits this mold every year, is they front up for round one, they're not selected round two, they're not selected round three, they might come back round four, and then we kind of have this scattergun approach. They might only play 4 or 5 games for the year and they're spread out, and we're kind of stuck with them because there's no value. So you're trading them really for maybe a couple $1,000 as opposed to what we'd like is 100 plus really. So
yeah. No, I had exactly that last year with Lockie Schultz from Freo. So thought I was onto something. We all got
sucked into that one.
Yeah, thought I was onto something when he played the first 2 games, and then we didn't see him again until about round 15. And I think I traded him a week before he came back into the team. So, just one of those things that SuperCoach can bite on the backside sometimes. So we better get to a few more questions as well before we sort of fire through what the, high-priced rookies is potentially leading to for a lot of team structures. But David Greenwood brings up an interesting name. He scored, I think, 110 for the weekend, on the weekend for the Tigers against GWS, and that was Tom Lynch. Key forwards are a no-go zone as far as I'm concerned. I've been sucked in too many times to go back there, and although I can see some appeal at 380K, the only time I would consider a key forward page is when they've got a favourable fixture coming up. And Richmond has a really good fixture at the back end of the year. I think they'll probably win 5 or 6 on the way home, and that's when I'd be looking at maybe jumping on a Jack Rewald or a Tom Lynch when they might average 100 or 110 in the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season and dominates Supercoach finals, but not as a starting pick when there's so much value up forward with your sort of Andrew Brayshaw, Jack Stephen, Devon Smith types.
It's such an interesting one, and I actually was writing something earlier that's going to come out in a few days. But when it comes to Tom Lynch, he's perhaps, to me anyway, the only exception to the forward rule I'd make. And that is only because I believe that this year, I mean, we've seen Tom Lynch get through his first full preseason unscathed. Richmond, I don't know how we stopped Richmond this year. I don't know how anybody stops Richmond this year, to be honest. But looks to me like he could be a genuine 70 to 80 goal forward this year. And if that's the case, you know, his bread and butter is contested marks and set shots for goal. And contested marks, we know, rank well in Supercoach. You know, obviously the goals he kicks, he doesn't just kick 1 or 2 a game, he feasts. He usually kicks 3, 4, 5 and can go upwards from there. So I just think, you know, the supply for Richmond, there's no shortage of it going into that forward line. And probably the thing that pleased me yesterday watching Richmond was that he did that with Jack Riewoldt in the same forward line too. So the preference is going to be hitting up and feeding Tom Lynch. But again, you make a great point, and that is that do you ride the roller coaster of what key forwards offer, and that is, you know, up and down scoring, or do you go for someone like an Andy Brayshaw? Do you go for someone like a Jack Stephen, a Devon Smith, who you know is going to roll through the midfield and then also hit the scoreboard as a forward?
So the high-priced rookies debate leads us into team structures, because that's going to have a big impact. The idea of going guns and rookies, which most of your top-ranking coaches have in previous years, has been blown out of the water a little bit based on the fact that we're spending an extra 400,000 or 500,000 to get these rookies with job security into our teams. So I think the 2 ways that I've seen coaches doing it, and the most popular seems to be starting a cheaper ruck 2, so having Brodie Grundy and then having Tim English or having Sam Naismith or having a player that costs a lot less next to Brodie Grundy, or sacrificing in one of the other positions, predominantly midfield, so going with, say, 4 rookies, or going with a cheaper option in midfield as well, which both of those options have their pros and cons. But so if you were looking at, I don't know, a way to structure up your team based on the fact that you're going to need to spend a bit more on your rookies page, what's the best way to go about it? Because I haven't touched my ruck, so I won't be doing that. But I can understand why people are enticed by a Tim English or a Naismith type, considering they're so much cheaper. I
have a hard and fast rule personally that, considering there's only 2 positions on field for rucks, they are set and forget. For me, ruckmen are, you know, when you look at the value that Gawn and Grundy have offered over the last 2 years, their consistency, their patterns of scoring, it's a no-brainer. For me, anyway. I don't like to skimp on the ruck division, because I know what I'm going to get week in, week out from Grundy and Gawn. Both of them are in the prime of their careers as well. So to answer your question, though, I think this year the best way to skimp, if you're looking to go a little bit short on one line, is actually in defence. I don't think we necessarily need to fork out big money for the likes of Hooley, Hearn, Lloyd, those types that were, you know, high ranking last year. There's so much value to be had in guys like Doherty, Houston, Dawson. You add in someone like a Robertson, you add in someone like a John Noble, you add in someone like an Isaac Cumming. All of a sudden you've got a really well-structured backline, you know, and there seems to be some depth as well when it comes to rookies in defence, which is, you know, something we can't really speak for in years past. So I think probably this year, if you're going to skimp in any area to then sort of bump up in others, it's probably through the back line. I just think the value is there to be had, particularly when you've got 2 breakout contenders in Dawson and Houston. Yeah, and so your other way of doing it, and Lockie Whitfield seems to be the one that people are happy to part with. Dustin Martin
Probably expected to average similar to Lockie Whitfield, between that sort of 100, 105. Whitfield might be a little bit higher than that come the end of the season. I think he averaged 110, 111 last year. But your other option up forward is going Dustin Martin, F1, leaving Lockie Whitfield out and hope he drops a little bit in price, and then jumping on some of these guys that have shown some really hot form during the preseason series. So we've got Darcy McPherson from the Gold Coast next to us, who you really liked what you saw from him. Darcy Parish from Essendon kicked 4 goals against Geelong, scored 110 against West Coast in Essendon's first game of pre-season as well. So both of those around the 460 mark. Hugh Greenwood turned up as well during the pre-season too. His role looks a lot friendlier up at the Gold Coast as well. So there's a lot of value options around that 450, 460 price. And then I think the thing about them is you've just got to be able to pick which one's going to have the breakout season as well. And you've got to throw Christian Petrarca at 441 into that mix as well, after his 188 against the Crows in the first week too. So there's probably 6, 7, 8 options. Jordan Dawson that you mentioned there can be picked as a forward too, that you can potentially throw a blanket over. And it's really like the coaches that prosper using that option are going to be the ones that absolutely nail that, or 1 or 2 450, 460 options that end up being premiums come the end of the season.
Well, I think what you said is spot on. And even I'll just go back a step to the Lockie Whitfield pick. I've actually got him out of my side at the moment. And for reasons that, I'm just finding too much value to be had in the forward line. And it allows me, and, not all coaches will agree with this, but it allows me to take a few more safer selections with my absolute gun midfielders. I'm talking about McRae's, Neil's, Kelly's, these types. So for me, you've got my boy Darcy McPherson there on the screen. It's really interesting because, we saw that first game and everyone went, oh, wow, okay. He had a pretty good run home last year. Lots of people sort of remember that form coming into the preseason. But again, sort of nobody could really trust him. We see that great game in the first week of the Marsh Series. Then we see him back it up again. He's averaged 130 points at a 1.34 points per game. Points per minute game. It's extraordinary figures. And just quietly, Stewie Jew is getting around the offices here at Fox Footy today, and I had a sneaky ask her about D-Mac and see where he might play, and he says he'll be played the way you see him in the Marsh Series. So that is music to my ears as a SuperCoach player, and for that reason, he's in my midfield. Again, you mentioned Christian Petrarca, massive 1 week. Obviously, it's pretty hard to back up a 180-point effort the following. I don't think even the best in the business don't really do that. So, 127-point average for him is, pretty good considering the price point. And Devon Smith, 102-point average as well. I just think, so many good options in that forward line. And, to sort of reiterate what I said earlier, if you let's say you roll the dice with those 3 in your forward line with, say, Dustin Martin, right? If one of them isn't performing in the first 2 weeks and they're really down on your expectations, it's a simple sideways trade to the one that is, because they're all basically priced in the same, bracket. So you do get those first 2 weeks to correct some, starting options. I did it last year. I can't remember who it was, but I moved him to Toby Green, and the rest is history. But sometimes you take those risks, they don't pay off, but you do it calculatedly enough so that you can sideways move to somebody who actually is. So you get a second bite at it as far as I'm concerned. D-Mac for me is a certain starter. Can't go past him.
Yep. And Paige, just before we wrap things up, great to be joined by you this Savo. You mentioned there's a heap of content coming up on the Fox socials and website in the next few days. What can we look forward to?
Look, we're breaking down a Stardom-Situm series on our rookies. So the rookies that performed well from a time on ground point of view and a points per minute average. So these are the guys that, obviously you should be looking at. The ones that we've been looking at that obviously disappointed us, and we'll be covering those off across all 4 lines in SuperCoach. So a bit of rookie content coming your way. Of course, there's plenty that the Phantoms dished up today. His monster guide was fantastic. So if anyone hasn't read that, I highly recommend giving that a view. That was a great read.
Yep, and going to be an exciting year with our new SuperCoach show launching at your Fox Studios in the next couple of weeks too. So
yeah,
can't
first
wait
episode on the
for that.
19th. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of banter, and definitely a step up in production from our little Facebook live videos. But I think the community is going to enjoy that. That's for sure.
Yeah, so plenty to look forward to. Only 9 days until round 1 of the AFL season. Try not to change your Supercoach team too much between now and then. I'll probably go and change mine once we jump off here. But Paige, thanks for jumping on board again. Always good to chat, and I'm sure we'll speak Supercoach again soon.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for all your questions. heraldsun.com.au or Fox Sports for all your latest Supercoach news and analysis.